If you love the flavours of Southeast Asian cooking, Vietnam and Thailand, and you love growing your own, but you live in a cool climate, it can be a challenge to grow some of those fresh green flavours of that region. They're tropical, and hot climate plants are possibly incompatible with a cool climate. However, there's one plant that can really add to Southeast Asian cookery and is a fresh green, and you can grow it in a variety of climates because it's very hardy, and that is Vietnamese mint. And Vietnamese mint is also achievable in a pot. It's very hardy and can survive indoors with some good natural light. Hi, I'm Robin, and I've been filming my small edible garden over the last year and a bit. So this episode is all about Vietnamese mint and looking after the plant in a cool climate and how to use this aromatic and beautiful herb. This plant is known as Vietnamese mint in Australia and by a multitude of other names across Southeast Asia and the world. It is wonderfully aromatic. If you happen to brush past it or tread on it, it lets off scents of aniseed, basil, mint, a bit peppery and hot, and those are the flavours that it brings to cooking. It's pretty much an essential for Southeast Asian cookery, and I think an essential for any herb garden. Vietnamese mint is cool hardy, and in my cool climate, if I provide a fair amount of water, it can survive my zone 7 winters where I get a fair few frosts and I can go down to about -7. But even if your climate is too cold for the plant, you can bring it indoors and have it all year round. I find if I leave the plant exposed to a lot of frosts, it dies off, but does shoot up the following year. So at first I had it in my veggie patch, and each winter it got frosted and died off and came back. But I made the decision to take it out of the veggie patch because after several years, I found it was spreading and it was taking over. I dug the plant up last winter and I meant to replant it pretty much straight away, but it got left in a bucket in that position for many months. Many frosts, chickens running around and nibbling it, and it managed to survive, and it was really just sitting in a boggy water condition. So they like a lot of water, and it sort of demonstrated to me that they can quite handle cold weather. This is a very hardy plant, one for the plant killers out there, I think. I eventually did repot it. The plant has a wide variety of conditions that it can thrive in. I've got it round the front in my chook pen in almost full shade. It can survive in full sun. One of the key elements is that the plant does need regular water, and I think it can handle most soil types. The chickens do nibble the leaves up to a certain point, so it's kind of got a green top and a bit stalky. The plant can handle sun and shade, but it does get a bit leggy in the shade. In full sun, the plant displays a distinctive dark arrow marking on its leaf that almost completely disappears in full shade. They can take periods of dry as well, and so I went away in the beginning of summer and the plant didn't get quite enough water, and when I got back the plants were very wilty and not looking great, but a few buckets of water and a bit of care afterwards and they were back as good as new. How to get Vietnamese mint if you don't have a plant in the first place. You can buy little punnets. I find the most easiest way to propagate is via cutting. If you go to an Asian grocer's in Australia at least, you can usually buy Vietnamese mint. They'll grow equally well from the cuttings that you buy in the grocers as from a cutting I've made from a plant. It's not a particularly difficult plant to make a cutting from. Really, you can just plonk the stalk in some soil and it'll generally take hold. I did play around with leaving the plant in water for a little while and then adding some worm juice, and it definitely produced some excellent roots if you want to give it a good head start. But in the end, again, a very hardy, easy plant to grow, transplant and propagate. Vietnamese mint doesn't seem to be affected by many pests or diseases, but I do note that this vegetarian ladybird has had a bit of a nibble of the leaves. I've not seen the plant flower in a full shade position. To get a flower, you will need sun and also humidity. I've actually never been able to propagate the plant from seed, so I might be missing some vital humid elements. One of the wonderful things about Vietnamese mint is that it's a food plant that you can grow in almost full shade. And so for my garden, it's a huge advantage to be able to use some of my shady, least ideal spots to grow something edible that I can use in my cooking. I do notice that Vietnamese mint does get a little more leggy or stalky in the shade, but the antidote is to just keep using it and pruning it. The plant responds very well to pruning and will definitely bush back up. When pruning any plant, for best results, always cut back to a leaf or a node. It's really only the leaves that are eaten, and they're generally used raw in salads, rice, vegetable dishes, and a lot of Asian soups and stews. I make a lot of Vietnamese rolls, and I usually include a bit of Vietnamese mint in the salad. One of the things I find is in Australia, it's really hard to get the super fine rice paper wraps that you get in Vietnam, even though most Asian grocers sell a variety of the rice paper wraps. But my recent trip did improve my dipping sauce recipe. I also use Vietnamese mint as part of the greens in my pho soups. This is a vegetarian recipe, but you can also use chicken stock, and the quality of the soup really comes down to the stock. This pot smells absolutely beautiful as it's wafting in the breeze. It was actually picked for the purposes of making some cuttings for a painting. I actually made this for 92-year-old artist Joyce and friends to paint one beautiful afternoon. It was really just straight cuttings, and so they were picked a few hours before we painted them, and I just arranged them in the pot. Gave them a good water, but unfortunately they did wilt a little, and I did think about redoing it with a more perky plant, but I thought I'd let it go just because gardening is not a perfect thing, and the cuttings you make will wilt and then they do perk up, and these are those very same cuttings, but in their moment they were a bit wilty. Day one of their cuttings life, and so these are now a fair few weeks later and they've never looked back really. You can get yourself an instant pot of Vietnamese mint pretty quickly, and they do make a nice indoor plant and the aroma is divine. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and thank you for watching all the way through to the end, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Bye.